no one wants to address the fact that many men are actually not ensouled. Their mother didn't orgasm when they were conceived. That's why women find them repellent. Social commentary by @HollowEarthTurf. To this, when this came across my desk, it was just a screenshot because I believe this person has me blocked. And at the time that I retweeted the screenshot, she or he had 4,590 likes to this. The idea that men are not ensouled because their mothers didn't orgasm when they conceived them. This only applies to men, not women, because I'm pretty sure that not orgasming when they conceived their child is probably something that also happens to women, but I guess it's just men. It's just men. Just men. Men put you on blast. Your mom had to orgasm when she conceived you, or you don't have a soul. At least according to HollowEarthTurf. And my response was, imagine if we actually lived in a feminist patriarchy. I'm never going to not like that. It just makes these responses so just gives them a little bit more fun and liveliness. All right, and in response to my response, Non-Morature says, that's not feminism. That's just pure misandry with mambo jumbo spirituality bullshit. You are actually the same people. Context and parameters are different, but the intent is the same. Dehumanizing an entire group based on one single parameter with a bunch of bullshit causation. Okay, so I am, in retweeting this lunatic who thinks that men don't have souls, retweeting that, I am the same as her. I don't know. Maybe he's looked at my Twitter timeline and he's like, wow, she's awful because she really, really, really despises the association between women and victimhood. Really despises the association between women and victimhood. And the best way to break that is to point to the fact that women are also aggressors. They're also villains. But regardless, maybe that's what he's responding to. All I can go on is the screenshot, what I responded to in the screenshot, which is, imagine if we lived in a feminist patriarchy. And what I meant was, if we lived in a feminist patriarchy, in actual feminist patriarchy, do you think women would be getting away with saying things like men don't have souls? Like, somebody brought up in this thread way back when there was a pamphlet that went around in Christendom about how debating whether women had souls. Okay, the story of that is that it was written by a bunch of, I believe, college-age trolls. So in other words, these young men set out to write something inflammatory, and they did. And then the powers that be, the church, had to address this offensive material, and they did so during a meeting which was, be it resolved, do women have souls? But of course, the answer was yes, and nobody should be even asking that question. But they had to do it because everybody was getting hugely offended that anyone would entertain the idea that women did not have souls. Okay, that is the story of that. So no, there was no debate over whether or not women had souls. There was just a bunch of pranksters ruffling everyone's feathers, and the church being like, okay, we got to address this because everybody's losing their shit, and saying, of course women have souls. There's no real debate. But anyway, going back to this, if we lived in an actual feminist patriarchy, could you imagine this HollowEarthTurf saying like stuff like this publicly? She'd be put on a list. You know, there'd be an alphabet agency monitoring her home. You know, one of them would have been, snuck into her life somehow, made friends with her so they could keep tabs on her. She would be, eventually she might be swatted and then sent to jail on some spurious charge. Like that's what would happen to her. She'd be on a watch list. Like me. But she's not. That's what I meant. I meant that her ability to make these incredibly, gratuitously inflammatory comments and not have any of the powers that be convene like a meeting to discuss, oh, well, this is horrible, this pamphlet that's about men not having souls. Of course the church did, of course the government does not agree with this. This is not even there shouldn't even be a discussion on this. This is ridiculous. Of course they do. Shut up, everybody. Okay? No, we're not going to have that. She just gets to mouth off like this in public, dehumanizing half the human race, and everybody's like, oh, there, dear. There. You're such a cute little girlie. Oh. Nobody could possibly hold you to account to anything. You're just a woman. Just a sweet little goldie. You know, that's it. That's all she gets. That was my point. And because of that point, this individual is comparing me to her as if we are the same, because I am pointing out, well, I really, it's because I use the magic F word, feminism, and then everybody crawls out and says, you're dehumanizing feminists. By what? Pointing out that their theories are bullshit? Look, if feminism is a scientific branch of study or a scientific perspective on society and the relationships between the gender, me pointing out that the science is shit is not dehumanizing feminism. Right? Me criticizing it is what's supposed to happen if feminism is science. Okay? Anyway, I said, do you know, this is to non-mature, who basically made the equivalence between the hollow earth turf who thinks that men don't have souls in me, because we're both, both sides are equally bad, you see. Do you know that feminist framework in domestic violence and sexual assault research is to try to prove that men use rape and beating women to uphold patriarchy? I'd be careful about that both sides shit. See, I'm not the same because I don't think things, or I don't try to assert things. Let's say, I don't even try to assert things. Let's just start with the first step. I don't assert things about the world, incredibly outrageous statements, like men oppress women for their own benefit with no proof. In fact, the absence of proof, the opposite of proof. I don't assert that. But even more, I don't take my assertion, ferret my way into genuine fields of study around human ills, and then attempt to manipulate, browbait, ostracize, and get fired anybody who opposes my desire to use the victims of domestic violence and sexual assault to shore up my ideology. Okay, so I'm going here. I'm saying, yeah, I don't think I'm like that. I really don't. I don't think there's an equivalence to be had here. And more mature. Sorry, I did not mean. The term feminist has been stretched and misused so much, like many others, that I need you to back it up. I prefer sticking to precise definitions. Feminist framework in research is trying to prove as a nonsensical, vague claim without substance. Okay. Of course I have receipts. I always do. This is from an integrative model, feminist model, the evolving feminist perspective on intimate partner violence. McPhail et al., 2007. As McPhail, and this is my response to normature, as McPhail confesses in his paper, feminist theoretical perspectives are dominant in the field, that is, the field of domestic violence and sexual assault research, and feminist theoretical perspectives focus on the link between men's violence against women and patriarchal structures of power, considering that male violence against women is both the result of historical differences in power between men and women and a tactic for maintaining women's subordination, right? So simply, feminists believe men use rape and domestic violence to maintain patriarchy. And I am being compared to someone who asserts that about men. Like my dehumanization, and all I did was I said, hey, isn't it ridiculous that this person says men don't have souls in a supposed feminist patriarchy where apparently women are subject to rape and domestic violence to keep them in line? She certainly feels free to dehumanize the half of the human race she says dehumanizes her and beats her to keep her in line. She feels free to insult them and say they don't have souls. That was the point. Okay, so what is his response to me giving him the receipts? Yes, feminists do this. They get into domestic violence research. They get into sexual assault research. They distort the statistics. They have all kinds of techniques to do it. One, they create a time scale that men are less likely to admit to their. So, for example, if you keep the time scale to 1 year, you tend to find parity in victimization between men and women. If you go to 5 years, it goes down to something like 25%. You go to 10 years, it goes down to 5%. That's about the same as lifetime. And it's because men have greater difficulty with recalling traumatic events. Don't know why, but it's what's found in the literature. So feminists will use longer timescales in order to reduce the rate that it's perceived that men are victimized. They'll also do things like they'll construct survey instruments that don't just ask people if they have experienced violence in the last year. They ask them to, well, you've said yes to having experienced violence in the last year. I would like you now to visualize all of the instances of violence that you've experienced. Please just remember what it felt like to have somebody's fist in your face, how it felt like to be so helpless. And tell me each time. I want you to tell me each time that happened in the last year. And of course, that results in an undercount in men. But it also apparently has started to result in people hanging up the phone. So now we're seeing these feminist corrupted studies not even being published because for example, the CDC 2018 study wasn't even published because it had such a terrible non-response rate. People were hanging up. They were refusing to answer the questions because feminists are making these questions more and more intrusive in order to manipulate the data to reduce male victimization. That's what they're doing. And they're doing it because they have a particular ideology that they bring to this science. And they believe that victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence serve feminist ideology. Okay, that's the honest to God fact. Nobody should be going into these fields with a framework or a perspective. But let's hear this both-siders response to me after I give him receipts. Actually, I add another statement, which is, here's where you start to shuck and jive. Which is exactly what he did. Non-mature replies, here is where I notice that you confuse the terms perspective and framework, which ain't good start for you. Let me give a minute to read. That's an interesting read. No surprise that all theoretical models carry some degree of bias. The critiques are valuable to progress models. However, your claim reflects a misreading and oversimplification of the paper influenced by your own biases. My original point stands. Paper explicitly says, a tactic. Feminist theoretical perspectives focus on the link between men's violence against women and patriarchal structures of power as a tactic for maintaining. So men's violence against women is a tactic of maintaining women's subordination. So maintaining patriarchal structures of power. This is what is stated as the feminist perspective. And incidentally, framework and perspective are often synonymous in the literature. So that's bullshit, even to call that out. It's basically arguing what is. But now he's basically saying it's a misreading and an oversimplification of the paper, influenced by my own biases. What dishonest fuckery. I say the feminist perspective or framework is that Men use violence to uphold patriarchy. The paper says that is the predominant, not just the predominant feminist framework or perspective, it is the predominant perspective in these studies. And this person comes back with this shit. Oh, you're misinterpreting. But what else are they going to do? They've been caught red-handed with a false equivalency. So I said bullshit. And then he responds, that's a bit short for a rebuttal. And I said, because I've proven my point. And you have not only displayed your ignorance of the subject, feminism, you've chosen to pick at a term, framework, which is often used as synonymous with perspective in the literature. There's no point arguing with a rube. Like, you're coming at me with stupid things like, oh, well, perspective and framework they're used synonymously in the literature. Feminist perspective, feminist framework. And then I say, oh, good Lord, goodbye. And then he does a whole bunch of little cryy faces. And then I do a rolling cryy face and then goodbye. But it's like, there is no equivalence here. I'm not proposing that women use rape and domestic violence to uphold matriarchy. I'm not heading up an entire branch of absolutely corrupted social science that basically turns victims of rape and sexual assault and domestic violence into grist for feminism's ideological mill, right? I'm not trying to screw around with actually helping people in need because I'm trying to uphold an idea about reality that actually, it's feminist theory, conjecture, right from the first start, feminist conjecture has not been framed in a way that could be proven true or false, much less being proved true or false. You don't have to prove that it's wrong. It's never been proved it's right. It's never even been stated in a way that could be proved that's right. It's never even been subjected to that kind of scientific rigor. And when it is, it always fails. Honestly, it's not the theory itself that's subjected to scientific rigor. It's never been. It's just basically, it's the one, it's just the first reaction. Just give me one initial miracle and I shall create feminism, whole cloth from nothing. It's the knockdown on predictions that feminism makes about certain things. Like feminism makes a prediction about whether or not people are going to have, men are going to have more implicit bias than women. And they do a test. Do men have more implicit bias than women? No. Women have significantly more implicit bias than men. The feminist framework or perspective would predict that women would have less implicit bias than men. It finds the opposite. And the fact that this framework, this perspective, has never even been shown to have any solid predictive value, that never makes them call into question their conjecture. This is such a corruption of science. It's so repulsive. And the fact that we have allowed something that is so outrageous, a conjecture about the relationship between the sexes, it's so outrageous, to become the basis of so much of our institutional thinking around these issues and important social issues like domestic violence and sexual assault, and allowed it to inform how we teach kids about themselves as men and women. The fact that we base this all on unsubstantiated and frankly now amply disproven, since none of its predictions have come true. Just even setting aside the fact that the original conjecture has never been subject to any kind of intellectual rigor. The predictions that result from that original conjecture have been proven false over and over and over again. And we still insist on perpetuating this massive, fraudulent lie about something so essential to our society, which is the relationship between men and women. And we are destroying it. We are right now destroying it. And I've gotten into, had discussions with Brian about, for example, Trump putting in tariffs to bring industry back to the US. But here's the problem that I see. Okay, maybe you can make things so expensive that production in the US becomes more attractive. But I have seen men walking away from jobs that are significantly more remunerative. They get more money than working in a factory because they don't feel like there's anything in it for them. I mean, they're earning like 50, 100,000 a year, but they don't see a family at the end of the tunnel. Like they don't see an end. They don't see anything in it for them to continue to work, even though they're making significantly more than the average. You know, if they have the ability, they just are like, you know what, whatever. I'm not interested. So how are you going to get these men to take these jobs that are going to come back as a result of the tariffs when the relationship between men and women is so destroyed that they have no realistic possibility of a female partner? And if they do get a female partner, they have been exposed to years and years and years of toxicity from women, and women saying, and then they have to ask themselves, am I the one who is wanted here, or is it my money? And, you know, in the past, when women weren't capable necessarily or didn't have as much access to earning money, that could be a thing that a man gave his wife that he had to. Like it was an aspect of him as a man. And there was no like, oh, she's a gold digger, because that was his role. You know, that is what he gave to the family. That was what his expectation, right? And now they have to wonder, well, is she with me for me? Is she with me because she wants a man, or because she wants money? Right? And it's like, you can do as many tariffs as you want. You can try to bring us back as much of production as you want. But if you cannot inspire your young men to take these jobs and be productive, because the relationship between men and women is so crap that men are deciding it's not worth the squeeze. Some men are deciding it's just not going to happen for them. They've become completely demoralized. Other men aren't demoralized, but they're like, it's not worth the squeeze. So I'm just going to make as little as possible, live on that, and be fine. Right? You cannot solve the productivity crisis with tariffs. You have to repair the relationship between men and women, because men and women incentivize each other. And I am not pumping more of that toxin into the landscape. I mean, people will say, well, you're calling women out. Yes, because in some ways they do need to be called out. But I am not advancing notions that women have constructed society and they use violence against men to uphold their reign of terror. Like, that's absurd. Like, women who are violent generally are the victims of violence as children themselves. Okay? Or alcoholism involvement, or other kind of social depredations. Like, this really, like, the entirety of sexual violence and domestic assault should not have ever come into any kind of contact with ideologies like feminism, period. People who deal with this stuff should not be looking at it through an ideological lens. And I include any kind of, even anti-feminist. Just take care of the people that need to be taken care of. That's it. Don't try to prove your social theories using other people's pain, right? So it's like, I call that out, right? I call out all of the downstream effects of that. We're not going to fix the relationship between men and women until we get rid of that lie. Because everything, a lot of the problems between men and women are downstream of that lie. And I'm sorry, there is no equivalence between someone who's trying to tell the truth and someone who's lying. All right, well, I hope you found this edifying. Okay, I'm going to do it. Come on. Come on. Oh, wait. I have to get all in. There we go. Ah. Haha, that's so cool. Okay, so I hope you found this edifying. I hope you enjoyed it. I want you to have a lovely evening, afternoon, second brunch, wherever you are, wherever you may be. Hug your dog for me. And thank you for your kind attention. Oh, I forgot to say, my name is Allison, and this was my adventure on Twitter. See ya. I think I can say it simply. There's no equivalency when one side is lying and the other is calling them out for it.